to I-24 News Defense Magazine. I'm Alon Ben David with your weekly review of security, intelligence, and strategic affairs. In this edition, we talk to IDF Advocate General Dani Efroni about the internal investigations he's leading inside the IDF following the war in Gaza. We explore the Aero India show and discuss the strategic relations between Israel and India, which came out of the closet this week with Israel's ambassador in New Delhi, Dani Carmon. All this and more coming right up. We are joined now in the studio by Major General Dani Efroni, IDF Advocate General, who is responsible for internal legal review of all IDF operations and conduct. Thank you for joining us, General Efroni.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are conducting dozens of investigations about the Gaza war. Have you found in any of them evidence for committing war crimes?
The IDF is the military of democratic state. As such, is organization that the rule of law is one of its basic, and it's not slogan for us.
Before we delve into those specific issues, Lauren Iso reminds us of some of the pressing matters the Advocate General is currently investigating.
While the International Criminal Court has launched a preliminary examination of IDF conduct during Operation Protective Edge, the IDF Advocate General Dani Efroni has launched an internal criminal investigation. The IDF's independent legal department, headed by Efroni, is conducting the review. Efroni cites the professionalism of the IDF's legal body as a sufficient alternative to the ICC's examination, one that makes international probing unnecessary. Thus far, Efroni has begun investigations on 15 separate incidents. One of the bloodiest days of the conflict was on August 1st and is referred to as Black Friday. After a soldier's body was taken captive by Hamas operatives, a fierce response from the IDF killed more than 100 Palestinians in Rafah. Black Friday is under inquiry by the ICC as well as the IDF for alleged disproportionate military retaliation. Some other incidents under criminal investigation by the IDF include a shelling of a UN school, a Gaza beach strike which killed 4 children, and looting by IDF soldiers.
Lauren Iso mentioned the Black Friday, the August 1st battle in Rafah. Have you found that the use of force by the IDF in this combat was according to international law requirements?
Listen, you have to know, and as we face this situation, it's a very, very complicated situation. You know, the contemporary battlefield has a lot of challenges. And the most important challenge is to implement the principles of laws of armed conflict during such a combat, which we face an asymmetric warfare, in the meaning that we are, as I mentioned, an organization that the rule of law is one of its basic, and we committed to. The other side, the terror organization, is not committed to the rule of law. On the contrary, he abused it, he manipulated it, it distorted the implementation of the laws of armed conflict. And we, as I mentioned before, are in the middle of conducting a serious and intensive and ongoing process of examining those exceptional incidents. You mentioned now the Rafah incident. It is on my table. The examination of this and others such incidents is being conducted by special and professional teams of commanders that their missions is to collect the information and all the data needed for me to make the decision whether to open a criminal investigation in those cases.
So you haven't reached a conclusion on the Rafah case yet?
Till now, it is on my table. As I mentioned, it's very complicated, and we check all the information, and there is a lot of information that should be reviewed by us.
Looking, for example, at the battle in Sajaya, in which the neighborhood absorbed more than 100 tons of explosives. How do you measure proportionality in such urban scenario?
This is one of the challenges that I mentioned. It's a challengeable, very challengeable issue to implement those laws of armed conflict, especially when the other side, the terror organization, used the civilian population as a human shield. as a system, as a method in his combat, is his method of combat, that it's totally illegal. And we are trying to implement the rules of law, strictly the rules of the laws of armed conflict. This challenge was one of the issues that we dealt last week during our first international legal conference that held in Ramat Gan, actually in Ramat Gan, with participants, experts, and scholars from the field of laws of armed conflict from all over the world, from 15 countries.
One incident that you've already ordered a criminal investigation is the killing of 4 children in the Gaza marina on July 16. Do you genuinely believe that someone has ordered an intentional airstrike to kill children?
Actually, this incident is under a criminal investigation, and I haven't got yet the file, the criminal file. But what can be said about this incident? That I ordered to open the investigation not because of suspicion or reasonable suspicion that one of our soldiers, pilots, or officers intentionally target children, knowing that they are children in the beach. It was not the reason for investigating this issue. It's severe negligence. But I can't elaborate more than what has been said now.
In your past, you've been an operational commander. How do you feel about summoning soldiers to criminal investigations, the same soldiers that you're sending into harm's way to fight and risk their life, and then you investigate them as criminals?
As you mentioned, my career can be divided to 2. Part is the second part is the legal career in my unit. The other was in operational unit, and I really understand the situation. It's not a pleasant situation to be summoned to investigation in any scenario. Even more so, talking about operational activity. It's not pleasant to the officer or soldier that has been summoned to this occasion. And it's really not easy for me to make the decision to open criminal investigation. But as I mentioned, we are, first of all, a military that the rule of law is a value. We are not investigating because of any obligation, legal obligation, international legal obligation. No, we do it because of our values as a military of a democratic state, and the rule of law that is being implemented on daily basis.
But sometimes it feels as if you're driving it into absurd. When the Gaza division commander is meeting with the civilians of Nahal Oz and says that I know exactly where are the Palestinians firing at you, but I cannot strike them because there are refugees there. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, because the answer is in your question. The military commander of Gaza division said he can't do it because there is refugees, because he doesn't want to harm civilian or uninvolved. He is trying to do his best to minimize the casualties, the civilian casualties that are uninvolved in the combat activity against us.
So maybe the legal tools that you are providing the commanders are insufficient for such scenarios.
I don't think so. I agree with something that I mentioned before, that it's challengeable. It's very challengeable to the commanders to implement the rules of engagement, to implement the laws of armed conflict during those sensitive situations that he has to face. It's a very tough mission, but we and our commanders do their best to meet this challenge.
Major General Dani Efroni, I want to thank you very much for coming to our studio.
Thank you, Adam.
Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon arrived in India last week for the Aero India exposition, becoming the highest Israeli official to openly visit the subcontinent in the last 12 years. The visit underscored the tightening security ties between Jerusalem and Delhi, with India being the largest customer of Israeli defense products. More in the following report.
Israel-India strategic cooperation received major public acknowledgement last week following a visit of Israel's Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon to the Aero India exhibition in Bangalore and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the Israeli Industries Pavilion at the show. Defense and security cooperation between the two nations was ramped up over a decade ago, but the Indian government preferred until recently to keep it quiet. Since Prime Minister Modi's party won the election last April, he has been a very public supporter of Israel. In September, during the UN General Assembly session in New York, Modi met openly with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Over the past 2 years, India has become the largest customer of Israeli defense exports. The annual value of arms deals between the two countries has topped $1 billion and makes up nearly 15% of all Israeli defense trade. Under Modi, Israel and India pushed ahead with joint development of an aerial defense system, which passed its first trial simulating combat conditions in November. In October, India opted to buy Rafael's Spike anti-tank guided missile in a deal worth $525 million, choosing the Israeli product over a U.S. offer of its Javelin missiles. Israel's relations with other East Asian nations, including Japan and South Korea, are also on the rise. Intelligence and strategic cooperation with those countries is an alternative for Israel amid the rising tensions between Jerusalem on one side and Western Europe and the United States on the other, tensions fueled by a lack of negotiations with the Palestinians and disagreements over nuclear talks with Iran. Both Israel and India declare that future cooperation between the countries will be enhanced and represent an array of joint values and interests.
Following the historical visit of Israeli Defense Minister to India that spotlighted the swelling defense ties between the two nations, we are now joined by Dani Carmon, Israeli ambassador to Delhi. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador Carmon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Despite the strong defense ties between the countries, India has traditionally refrained from inviting Israeli defense, foreign and prime ministers for a visit. What has changed now?
It is quite a change, but I would like to stress not only the change, but also the continuity of those relations. India and Israel have had diplomatic relations for the past 23 years, and I can tell you without any doubt that those relations have been there for many years, and they have been growing stronger and stronger until last year, in which they have also become more visible than in the past.
We've heard in the past about mega deals such as the early warning aircraft sold to India. Can you tell us what exactly is the volume of defense trade between the countries?
Well, as you know, Israel usually is not talking in the open about the volume of its defense deals and its defense activity, and I think we would better stick to this.
It is known that India has developed jointly with Israel the Barak 8 anti-missile system. When is the Indian Navy expected to deploy it?
I don't have an exact time, but I can tell you that much has evolved in this particular project. I have to say that the public domain of the Indian press is full with those accounts about what is happening. I'm not sure that I would like to go too much into the details of it, but a lot has evolved in the last year in this project and in others too.
Where do you see the defense relations going from here?
We have to take into consideration that India is now in the first stages of developing a new strategy in defense and in investments, foreign investment in defense, and in the area of what is called Make in India. And what the defense minister has done when he was here speaking and meeting with the prime minister, the defense minister, and the home secretary, who is in charge of homeland security and of the borders of this country, the very large, so many kilometers and thousands of kilometers of borders between India and its neighbors. Our defense minister has spoken and has heard what the Indian side is thinking about this large title called Make in India, and I think has definitely sent the message that Israel is here to continue its ties, to expand its ties on defense, on homeland security. We have to remember that India and Israel share the same challenges, similar challenges.
How are those ties perceived by India's neighbor and enemy, Pakistan?
I think that the defense minister, when he was here, he stressed by no uncertain terms that this relationship, this partnership is between two friends and two partners, India and Israel, and it is not intended against anyone. It is intended for the partnership and for the friendship between both countries.
Ambassador Kamon in Delhi, I want to thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you so much. Good night.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week for another Defense Magazine. Have a safe night from Jaffa Port.